Joe, why do you think it's so difficult for people to essentially let go of these preconceived ideas they have about um, just what they're used to in their life? Is that, I mean, through reading, and you mentioned DeMello, for example, you can see clear examples why we shouldn't attach ourselves emotionally to things. Why do you think some people are able to detach and some people struggle and get very emotional when people move towards soft topics for them, if that makes sense?
Complete sense. In my experience, which is just my experience, but people who are insecure um, are much quicker to compromise, self-compromise rather. So think about insecurity, which is one aspect of this. Insecurity is this not being sure. If had a big mole on my face, walking around wondering, is everyone, talking about my mole? Is everyone talking about my mole? Does everyone think I'm fat? Does everyone think I'm ugly? You're insecure. The thing about insecure people, it's not normally attached to reality. So they have a fear that's normally irrational. I know incredible, talented musicians and people like that who are way ahead of their years who worry all the time if they're good enough. You see on Instagram, you see people posting frequently pictures of their six packs, pictures of them in bikinis looking all sexy. And it makes you feel bad about yourself. I'll never look like that. They actually probably feel way more insecure than you do because they're trying to push this image and get the validation. So insecurity is one element. You're looking for something to fill. So you'll take the action. The people who are insecure, you think about it, they're more urgent. They have more urgency to find a solution. Again, to find myself. And I wrote a blog post about this, almost like the train ticket. It's like those people are kind of looking for a train ticket. They're not really willing to kind of do the work for things because they're in a rush to fill that hole. That category of people are always looking for a train ticket. That's why it's always easy to sell them a train ticket, whether it's a cult, when it's that radical, or whether it's a bit of short-term validation on social media, or it's a career path that has a lot of extrinsic kind of rewards to it. The more insecure you are, the more you are like a moth, a sucker to those things. So therefore, the idea you've married yourself to, handcuffed yourself to, is so important to abate those feelings of anxiety. You really hold on to them very tightly. That's been one thing I've seen a lot of. Why is it so hard? I think another thing is, again, the familiarity. It's the tension. A lot of people's worldviews are held together by a very core idea, a very core assumption. That if broken, so for example, Einstein, Einstein's view of physics was that it couldn't be, the universe couldn't be this completely random. Again, this is venturing outside of any of my core competency areas, but I'm giving it a go. The worldview he had of physics still rested on certain assumptions that it couldn't be completely random and there couldn't be these paradoxes. Whereas what I recall is that from quantum physics, that was the suggestion, that there was a lot of paradox and randomness and all this stuff. And it's ironic because what made Einstein Einstein was his ability to go past assumptions that other people had to actually, become so prominent, which again comes back to without the box and why innovation is so often normally driven by young people. It's why we have so many tech entrepreneurs in their early 20s and why Gates and Jobs, even back in their time, emerged in their early 20s, and Wozniak. And so, they worldview, to consolidate it, worldview, identity, insecurity, but also familiarity. And familiarity is a real seductive one. It's so hard to, change what's familiar.
I mentioned the Dunning-Kruger effect, for example, but I still find it very difficult on a day-to-day basis. Like when someone challenges you, you have that natural reaction. I don't know, that defensive reaction, and you kind of have to take a step back and really sort of give it a bit of time because your instant thought is to just, say what you think straight away because it just comes natural. But, Yeah, I mean, do you resonate with that in the sense that like you see yourself, if someone challenges you, you see yourself sort of reacting emotionally, and do you take a step back as well? Have you become conscious of that? Is that something you've learnt over time?
Yeah, I am. I definitely do. I think human beings are still human beings, and that this concept of Astro the dog I cite so often is still a reality. You know, even for the hyper self aware, whatever the hyper self aware look like. There's this book I was recommended by Liam called Radical Honesty by a guy called Brad Blanton, and pretty good book. And obviously, if you can't tell what it's about, the title kind of spells it out. It's that you should just be radically and brutally honest all the time. To the extent that in a relationship, if you're attracted to your wife's sister, you should just tell her that, and things like that. I don't think I agree with this stance at all. And the author had been through multiple marriages and stuff like that, which he argued was actually a good thing,
That
which may be
makes
the case,
that makes a bit of
which
sense anyway.
does make a bit of sense. But who's to say? Who's to say? Some people lack honesty, some people don't. So if you come at me and challenge me and say your views you're expressing on the podcast are way out there, and that's you don't really have the right to say those things, and who are you? It'll probably be initially an emotional reaction, especially if you've caught me off guard, especially if I'm not expecting it. But I think it's almost you can come back to a bit of Mark Manson and the subtle art of not giving a fuck, which is actually about no, what is worth actually investing a fuck into, care factor into, and what's not. I think you can ultimately choose to a large extent, but also you can't. It's still very hard to edit your reactions, if that makes sense. So I definitely think it's something you can cultivate over time, and it's more easy to cultivate the less you kind of care and identify. If you're a celebrity and you get all these angry Twitter and YouTube comments and stuff like that, a lot of them get very upset by it. Joe Rogan talks about it. And it's like you can't read that shit. Is the goal you're meant to be able to read that shit and have no emotional reaction? Well, you'd probably have to be very composed when you go in to look at it, I'd say. You'd have to prepare yourself. So if someone challenges an idea that's very deeply important to you, so I certainly try to keep as open-minded as possible. Again, strong opinions, loosely held. I have a lot of strong held beliefs, but I have to realize I actually have nothing to gain by trying to hold up. I try very hard not to be one of those people who says, no, this is the way. I have the way. This is what worked for me, therefore this is the way. I try very hard to avoid that. And some of the wisest people I know and the smartest people I know, they teach me a lot by always just almost giving a very strong disclaimer on their own advice. They'll give some very strong advice and go, but this is just me. I'm a product of my own experience, and that's it. So look, coming back to your point of your question, it's not necessarily easy. We're not necessarily designed to see, again, I don't know about the radical honesty thing. I don't know if we're designed to be confronted that aggressively all the time.